Welcome back to Reconfiguring Reality. I'm your host, the Jericho.
I'm Laura.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Josh.
Today's topic is on abortion.
So let's start first with what the medical definition of abortion is.
Okay, what's the medical definition?
Does anybody know?
What's with her and the 20 questions all the time? She's like that smug person in class who's like, Do you
It's
know what it
No,
means?
Laura, I don't know what it is. Please tell me.
The medical definition of abortion is the removal of pregnancy tissue, products of conception, or the fetus and placenta from the uterus.
God damn. Pregnancy tissue.
Well, that's all it is to start off with is a pile of tissue
tissue
and
yeah.
cells. It's not a person yet.
What is everybody's
Viewpoints.
side in this argument? Because that's
Well,
what we're
I'm
really discussing, right? The argument between
I am
pro-choice and pro.
pro-choice.
I think you should do whatever the fuck you want with your body.
So you're pro-choice.
Yeah.
I am also pro-choice.
Can you guess what I am?
Pro-life.
I was gonna say, I'm pretty sure you're gonna be playing devil's advocate here.
You know, it's a good guess, and I can see why you'd make that. I'm actually pro-choice.
Oh, okay, so you're just here to get under my skin.
Are you aware that the fight over whether or not to make abortion illegal was not started due to religion?
I did not actually. That's actually quite interesting for me.
I did. I knew that.
Killing me, Smalls, killing me.
Why?
Supposed to be sharing why we are one way or the other, and you're bringing in your factoid.
Well, I mean,
Who knows? Maybe that'll sway one of us.
To what?
I don't know.
well, because I
Trying to
hear a
help
lot
a
of
girl
people.
out here.
I hear a lot of people arguing that, they argue the legality of abortion because of religious standards and whatnot.
Well, a
But
lot
it
of the
wasn't
people
originally
that,
a religious issue at all.
well, yeah, but a lot of people that are like the people that are put on the internet and everything like that are mainly the people that are standing out there in front of clinics, and other, like, there are clinics that provide abortions and everything like that, but those clinics also provide other forms of health care for people,
Oh yeah, I
and they just
know.
kind of stand out there and they kind of just harass people,
Well,
whether you are in there to get an abortion or not. They stand there and they tell you, oh, well, we can help you save your baby, and it's like, dude, I'm here for a checkup or to get my
It's
flu shot.
it's not even just that. For me, is okay, you're Christian or
Mhm.
you're whatever religion you're in. That's your choice. I live in the United States of America where we have freedom of religion. I don't follow your same beliefs. You shouldn't be telling me that I can't do something because it's against your religious beliefs.
Mhm.
That, like, if someone can come up to me and have a normal discussion, not bringing up any religion when it comes to things like abortion, stuff like that, I am very happy to have that conversation, because to me, I could give two shits about if Christians believe in abortion or not. Because funny thing is the Satanic Temple supports abortions, and they try and go all the time to the Supreme Court being like, you're taking our religious freedoms away because you're taking our followers option to abortion away, and it's in
I
our faith.
believe Judaism and, I might be saying this wrong, you'll have to correct me, Islamic people.
It
In our religion, I can speak for Judaism. I learned recently about the Islamic one. It's what's best for mom. If it's literally it's what's best for the person, not the clump of cells. That you don't get like, damned to hell or whatever the fuck.
yeah.
Like they don't
Other
care. It's what's best
otherwise,
for you.
I am perfectly fine with if you have scientific evidence that you believe in, if it's vetted or not, whatever, fine, I'll have a conversation. But if it has anything to do with religion, I'm just gonna get up and walk away because you're not gonna sway me, I'm not gonna sway you.
What do you know about Roe versus Wade?
Oh, hold on now. Hold on.
Okay, go ahead.
Skip.
What?
Well, it's time for me to play devil advocate.
Oh Jesus.
Mhm.
So, couple things about that. So people say things all the time in this argument like, I don't care about religion, religion shouldn't dictate my body and things like that. You do understand that moral imperative and the democratic system we use, including our constitution, which protects your rights, is because of religion. Religion are the ones, not all, mind you, but we're talking about the Christian Judeo faith for the primary, are the ones that advocate moral purity. And your freedoms, as they were written, are a God-given right, not a ambiguous universal right. Because if we go by what the universe or what nature would allow, you don't have rights. Might makes right. If I have a bigger stick than you and you can't fend me off, rape, sodomy, whatever I feel like is right because I can take it and you can't stop me. The moral imperative comes from religion. It does not come from a bunch of free thinking people who agree that these things are bad. Because when the populace or mob mentality is given the option to choose what's right or wrong, it changes century to century, culture to culture, region to region. In today's world, there's still indentured servitude and slavery in other countries. There's still active people getting harmed, murdered, killed, and they don't live in a Western society, so they don't share our beliefs. So, like the point you made with the Satanic Temple, their beliefs, aren't being honored because they're trying to fight for it. Well, the thing about that is that it's a real fine line to play when it comes to governmental bodies deciding what is and isn't allowed.
But
This is why separation of state and religion was a mandate by our forefathers because of the problem that it creates, right? I'm pro-life in my belief. I would rather children not be murdered, regardless of how you view life. I don't believe the potentiality of life should be wasted. Because the darker side of me, I can think of many, many people I've met in my lifetime that have wasted their potential. And if I could swap them out for newborns and give them a chance, I would happily end a lot of people's lives and shuffle them off the mortal coil and make way for new people who aren't prone to making the mistakes they make. But
I
that's not, the morality of the situation we're in. That being said, I'm pro-choice because I don't think the government should have the power to dictate what we can and cannot do on a broad spectrum. Once you give a governmental body that kind of power, it quickly is a slippery slope from
well,
them protecting us and saying, yes, you can have some freedoms, and then quickly taking them away.
well, that's already happening with Roe v. Wade because now there is I can't remember if they're part of the House or the Senate, are trying to slip in making IVF totally illegal in a military bill.
Oh,
Yeah,
they're literally trying to criminalize people. If you have
But
fertilized
so
embryos, you
yes,
can't
but
get rid of
isn't that
them.
what are the but if they make IVF illegal, what those what
Those
are
are
you going to do?
wanted babies.
You can't sit there and destroy them because that's murder, but
Mm-hmm.
you can't implant them in the mother because it's
She might
illegal.
miscarry.
Well, it's not
that's
even miscarrying. Like that's where it's hard because
Well, but if you
you
implant them and she miscarries, they're seeing that as, oh, you murdered
well,
your
and
kid.
that's another thing is where would they draw the line if, let's say, they stop IVF, if a woman acts like has a miscarriage, who's to say they're not going to start charging women for having miscarriages because, oh, you must have done something wrong?
mm,
They've actually been
Well,
trying
that's my
women
point.
for that in
Exactly.
other
That's why we're
states.
on the same side of the fence in the argument, is because even though intrinsically you and I, or you and the three of me and the three of you, see differently as to the value of a child. Um, that being said, I don't agree that a woman should be forced to say you can't have abortions or you can't have your tubes tied or you can't whatever, um, on the basis simply to allow the government to rule that because of things like you pointed out. Governmental and politician, all the things that they do are still going to be what they do. There's always going to be somebody trying to pull some move or, throw in their own agenda and hide it behind a hot button topic, right? Like a lot of people, if you look back through the last, decade or two, a lot of like gay right movements and woke movements have hidden agendas. They're pushing things that aren't what they're waving in front of people. And this is backed by greedy people, by selfish people, by people who are taking advantage of an actual problem and using that mask to push their agenda. I mean, that's more of a discussion about governmental issues. But for me personally, that's why I happen to be pro-choice. Is I don't want anyone telling me what I can do with my own personal body, because then you start getting to that territory of like, could a doctor just imprison you because they think you're crazy, right?
Well, you have nothing to worry about. You're a man.
Men have a lot of things to worry about. The idea that a woman is only being affected by this is not true at all.
Just keep in mind, though, that he's not a white man.
I realized that as soon as I said it, I'm like, shit, but he's not a white man. He's not a rich white man.
Right.
Well, even rich white men,
Okay.
they're not evil devil people. They just happen to be the majority. The thing about being in a minority and me being one is that it's just like when you're a boss in a job. A lot of people look at you and they don't see what you do day in and day out. They don't know that you're doing payroll. They don't know that you're writing someone up who's you're about to have to fire. They don't know you're doing all this stuff. They just see you sitting at your desk not doing anything or looking at your phone. You may be poring over emails, getting your ass chewed out by the board, whatever. But because they don't physically see you working in front of them, they assume you don't do anything.
Mm-hmm.
When you make a stupid call, you as a manager may be like, "This is retarded. I hate this," but my boss is forcing me to do it. And my apologies if that word offended somebody. The thing is I'm getting is that not all people are evil because they have to make evil decisions at times. The alternative is they could say, "This job sucks. I don't want to do this," and walk away. But how many of us are willing to get fired every other day because they live in a world where tough calls have to be made, right? So bring us back to the discussion. Like I said, to play devil's advocate, there are a lot of things when it comes to abortion that I think have missed the mark. People talk about, well, it's my body, my choice, but that's not really the case. There are some aspects of abortion that is true. Like we shouldn't be able to force someone to get her tubes tied or deny her the like with the case of you have to go through like all these hoops and balances and all this nonsense to make a decision about your body, because we're not talking about you choosing to end a life. We're talking about you. It's like getting a tattoo, right? I shouldn't be able to tell you, no, Lorelai, you're not allowed to have a tattoo because I think tattoos are ugly or wrong. Like that's stupid. You should be able to do whatever you want with your body. It's your body, your decision. um it would be like if somebody tried to commit suicide and then we threw them in jail for attempted murder. Well, I don't want to see someone kill themselves. But if that's how they choose to exit this world, if they want to leave, then I mean that should be their choice, macabre as it may be. But that being said, we're not talking about abortion on the whole. Like when Roe versus Wade was overturned, a lot of people were up in arms because like, do you understand what this means? When they don't understand what it means, they're ignorant of the law.
What does it
For
mean?
example,
What does it
here
mean,
in
though?
well, all it really does is it turns the power back over to the states. So it's opposed as opposed to federal court now deciding and governing over this, it's now a state matter.
But governing over what?
Abortion, the rights and rules and laws that they can place or not place about abortion.
But the government's still telling a person what they can and cannot do with their body still, when it should be a discussion between them and their doctor.
Well,
They
they're
don't
not
have
telling
medical,
you. The state is. That's the difference.
Wait,
Okay.
but it's still the
but that's
government.
not right.
But
But
hold
that's
on.
not right.
What do you mean it's not right?
Roe versus Roe versus Wade was still a federal level.
Right.
It's never been given back to the states.
No, with the
By
overturning of it.
overturning it goes back to state law being the law that
So what
matters.
the Supreme Court did last year turns the Roe v. Wade over to the state. Like, so in Minnesota, we have what's called what's it called like a bubble, a safeguard, where in my constitution now it says I have every right to have an abortion, but Wisconsin has, I believe, a total ban, and I believe it's also, you can, if you are found to come into the state of Minnesota, Wisconsin can then charge you with murder if, like, let's say you go to your doctor and you find out you're pregnant, but then you take a trip to Minnesota and then you come back and you're not pregnant anymore. If they felt like it, they can sit there and charge you with murder because you were pregnant and now you're not. And there's no medical records in the state of Wisconsin proving you had a miscarriage. So the states now can decide. So, like Texas, I believe it's totally illegal. There are some that have 6 weeks bans, 12-week bans, where, like, if you're pregnant and you're 11 weeks, you can still have an abortion. There are some where it's totally illegal. So even if you're raped, it's an incestual, your child isn't going to make it or the mother's not going to make it. They don't care.
Yeah, so basically what Roe versus Wade did was it took the decision making to a federal level. So a common misconception about the laws that people have is that federal law always trumps state law. And the truth of the matter is that it doesn't work that way. It's not to say that the federal government isn't powerful or wouldn't take you to court, but it's two completely separate bodies of law. And that's where people get tripped up about stuff. So, for example, weed is still a drug and is still illegal according to the federal government. The federal government has never, in any way, shape, or form, unbanned the fact that weed is illegal. It is still a legal drug. They can still arrest you for it. They can still throw you in jail for it. Even if your state has legalized it, even if you have a weed card, even if the state has declared, everyone can have it, minors can have it, it doesn't matter. Federal law says it's still illegal.
And for
So
a full discussion on marijuana laws, please see our previous podcast.
Yeah, so like if I left the state of Minnesota with my edibles to go to, I don't know, is it's somewhat legal in Missouri, isn't it?
I don't
But
believe it's legal, but I think they changed like how much you're
decriminalized it
allowed.
or
Yeah,
something.
yeah,
So
they
like,
changed it slightly.
but let's say it had something with edibles and I was staying down in Missouri for a month and I brought 4 packs of my edibles. Technically, I'm trafficking now. Even though it's fully 100% legal for me in my state, I cross state borders, so now I'm a drug trafficker.
Yeah, it's the
Technically.
same thing with like car laws. All laws basically are subject to the same kind of, it works in one place and not another. And for a more like blatant example, like the recent border issue, right? Texas said, we don't want this happening. The federal government said, tough, you're going to have to let this happen. And the governor went, you want to bet? And called the National Guard in and says, if federal agents stop, you stop them. And it was a standoff between the federal government and the state government. And there's the reason why the two parties are separate is, again, it's a measure to ensure that tyranny does not take foothold. Because a lot of countries, if you know, that are just that are, I just lost the term I'm trying to think of, but basically that end up in chaos and turmoil and infighting and all this kind of stuff and revolutionary actions. They don't have that detailed level. There's just one leader usually, and then the normal standard. Our states are almost like countries unto themselves. The federal government really is supposed to be kind of like an overseer. It's supposed to handle things that on a broad scale, not a really minute scale. That's why Roe versus Wade was overturned, was because the government was essentially overstepping. They were telling all states what they should and shouldn't do. And it wasn't necessarily something that they really should be commanding.
Even though in the Constitution, um, it states that this is something that should be legal
Well, the thing
for
about
all
the
states.
Constitution is it protects rights,
Hmm.
but rights tend to flip flop around
But
in terms of their scope and their reach and things like that. There's amendments made and how they're viewed. It's like the Second Amendment, right? Some people say we should have our freedom to have any gun we want, whether it's a bazooka or a machine gun, doesn't matter. Other people say no, you know, that was an old rule. They had no idea that guns were going to evolve, which is a
well,
stupid.
it's not even that. It doesn't say what type of arms. So if the federal government decided, you know what, you guys are only allowed hatchets now.
Yeah, or
That
no
that
pocket knives, or
yeah,
no.
stuff like that. It's interpretation is the word I'm looking for, right? Each like Jericho may look at the Second Amendment and see it totally different than I do.
So the amendment that Roe versus Wade was using as an example was the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment.
Right.
What is that?
I have no idea.
I am not an attorney, so that law is not fresh in my mind, but we can look it up.
Okay.
Do you have it, Laura? Or
I
no?
don't.
Oh, okay. I was like,
It's something about the right to privacy.
What would you say it was again?
The Due Process
The due
Clause of the
process
14th
law.
Amendment.
Okay, got it. The Due Process Clause is found in both the Fifth and 14th Amendments to the United States Constitution. The 14th Amendment Due Process Clause guarantees procedural due process, meaning that government actors must follow certain procedures before they may deprive a person of a protected life, liberty, or property interest. The Due Process Clause describes a legal obligation of all states to operate within the law and provide fair procedures. So that was why it was overturned. So if that didn't make a lot of sense to people, in short, by the government stepping in, the federal government, I mean, and saying across the board, this is how things are going to be, they're denying the states the same privilege that women are wanting in my body, my choice. The state
but it's
is
a
saying
state. It's not a
the
person.
right, but the state is made up of people, right? We're a union. We're a collection of people. So if let's say everyone in your state, whatever state you happen to belong to, decided we all love abortion, right? They all want it unequivocally. No one is for pro life or any argument against pro choice. If the federal government were to say, we feel that it saves lives, whether you recognize it as life or not, and say scientists have proven that this clump of cells is actually a person, and take away your right to choose, everyone would be up in arms about it, right? Well, you wouldn't want them doing that. Therefore, the protection that Roe versus Wade afforded is the same thing, just on the opposite end of the argument. They were, for all the people who are pro-life, they basically said your choice doesn't matter. Your freedom doesn't matter and your right to vote doesn't matter. We're telling you this is how it's going to be. And that's breaking that amendment. So they're not doing it to harm people, and they're not doing it because they believe pro-life is the choice to make. They're doing it because it doesn't matter what side of the fence they were on. Whoever they sided with, they were in the wrong. So by reversing Roe versus Wade, it put it back in the voters' hands. If your state, as a collective, says, well, 51% of us say we're pro-life, and the rest of us go, well, we hate that decision, well, sorry, you got outvoted. If you
But
don't like it, you can move to another state that does have the vote that you like.
Do you guys know what Plan B is?
yeah, I've had to use it.
Trash, do you know what Plan B is?
Of course I do.
Jericho, I'm assuming you know what it is.
I do.
But
I
for
used to know the medical term,
listeners
but I
at
can't remember.
but for the listeners at home, Laura, please explain what Plan B is.
Plan B is it is a emergency contraception, or EC, that is taken up to 72 hours after unprotected sex to prohibit the
prohibit from getting pregnant.
Yeah, it's a
It
whole
pretty
medical
much
thing.
stops the egg from, yeah, yeah.
So
But you also found out that you should check your weight limit because you might need to double your dose.
I didn't know anything about that. I've never used it.
Yep.
I've only ever heard of it.
I've used it one time.
Oh, here it says in this article, Plan B is less effective for people with higher body weight. Good to know.
Hmm.
I know that there are some people who are against abortion that are also against Plan B, and think that like the contraceptions, the emergency contraceptions, should be included in the abortion laws.
Those are probably also
But
the same people that are coming after birth control as well.
but again, so like for me, Liam was only 6 weeks old.
Mm-hmm.
I was not risking having, what are they called? Irish twins
Mm-hmm.
is what they're called.
One
And
or two.
yes, we sat there and we didn't weren't thinking, which happens. But at the same time, I don't look at it as I killed a potential person, because there was a 50-50 chance I was either going to wind up pregnant or not already. I was just making sure it was more like 75-25.
But here's the thing is you call it a potential person. At the end of the day, it, people sit there and they're like, oh, well, if it has a heartbeat. It's technically not a heartbeat.
See, now you're getting
You
into the
want,
when does life start?
yeah, but I guess my definition in regards to that would be like brain activity because it doesn't feel pain until you have like brain activity. But like,
Well, there's new scientific studies that show brain or they can technically register pain at like a new specific week. I can't remember which week it is. I think it's like around 13 to 15 weeks or something like that. But
but
it's
either
one of those.
way, it's still a clump and it's not a person.
It's still a clump.
It,
It's a clump.
you got little fingers starting to
It's a
show and
clump.
stuff. Like for me, it's more of, if let's say I was 15 weeks pregnant and I died, would that 15-week-old fetus, child, whatever you want to call it,
Would it
would that
survive on
Episode.
its?
survive outside of my womb? No,
No,
it
it's
would
not
not.
viable.
I don't think it has
It's
lungs enough
not
for it,
a
does it?
God, I haven't been pregnant in over 13 or 11
Or what was
years.
your
I don't
question?
remember.
Lungs.
Um, they should be starting to develop, but they're not viable. So they're like little wet sacs. They're not expanded.
Okay, let's see.
But
It's the simplest way I can put it.
no, I know, but it's one of those things where it's like, should Plan B be illegal? Because isn't it just like spermicide technically to a point? Stuff like that. Then what's to say? Oh, well, condoms shouldn't be legal because they prevent pregnancies.
You're in birth control pills and blah blah
Yeah, like
Well,
that's
yeah,
a
there's
slippery
there's a huge
slope.
group of people that are like, oh well, because you take this or because you do this to prevent a pregnancy, you're preventing a life, and it's just that's when it starts getting sticky for me.
Okay.
But
It's just
even
like, really, guys?
even in that defense, I understand it, but there are some things where, like, heaven forbid, if a couple found out their child has Tay-Sachs, that is a painful way for a child to
I
die.
don't know what that is.
Tay-Sachs disease is a rare inherited genetic disorder that destroys nerve cells in the brain and spinal cord. It's caused by a mutation in the enzyme hexide, can't pronounce that word, uh, which prevents the body from breaking down gangliosides,
Do
a
you
group
want
of
me to read
chemical.
this?
So I know this is more for, I believe, Jewish couples.
Mm-hmm.
They're more prone to have children with it, but it's a very painful way for a child to die, and I believe they can live up to a couple months or at least a year or two, but they're in pain constantly.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay, I found here week 5. the baby's brain, spinal cord, and heart begin to develop. Week 6 to 7, the arms and legs start to grow. Eyes and ears
So
begin
it
to
looks like a small,
form.
like, dinosaur seahorse looking thing.
Your baby's heart continues to grow and now beats at a regular rhythm, and blood pumps through the main veins. At week 8, the arms and legs grow longer, hands and feet begin to form, and lungs start to form at week 8. Um,
So still a small alien.
Week 9, all of the essential organs have begun to grow.
That's your thing right there, is the essential organs start to grow. So
That's
it's
week
like if I
9.
find out I'm pregnant and let's say I'm in week 8, it doesn't have its essential organs yet.
Week 10, at the end of the 10th week of pregnancy, your baby is no longer an embryo, it is now a fetus.
So since we were on like the topic of when can a baby survive outside of the womb?
Mm-hmm.
Uh the chance of survival depends on the baby's degree of prematurity and birth weight. For example, 2/3 of babies born at 24 weeks
Gestation.
thank you, who are
Mhm.
admitted to a neonatal
Neonatal.
intensive care unit, a NICU, will survive to go home. 98% of babies born at 30 weeks gestation will survive. Now, I'm not saying I believe people who are 37 weeks can go, oh, you know what? I don't want to be a parent. No, that's just stupid. I'm talking about like 20 weeks that you usually find out you are pregnant within 8 weeks.
According to the article I just read, you don't find out until after 12,
Oh,
normally.
I found
So
out at
for
8.
some people, so people are different. Some people who have regular cycles, who work like clockwork may be able to figure it out. There are people who have like cysts and PCOS and POTS and everything like that where your cycles are irregular and they might not find out until later. So I think it depends on the woman.
Well, funny thing is Devin came home on R&R, and a week after he left, I found out I was pregnant. So that was only like a 3-week stint. So I was doing it as a joke, and all of a sudden the damn stick turned fucking blue.
Um,
That's funny.
But
the joke's
most,
on you then.
yeah, most babies born after 26 weeks survive, but a small number do not.
And that's not
So
counting the ones that have conditions.
yep. And so at 26 weeks, 8 out of 10 babies survive. Out of those that survive, 1 in 10 will have severe disabilities such as cerebral palsy, learning difficulties, and problem with hearing and vision.
Mm-hmm.
And this is from NHS Foundation Trust. It's over in Britain.
Which, I
But
mean, these diseases can also, or sorry, not diseases, these disabilities can also still happen even with a full term
yeah,
baby. We're not saying it's just, oh, because you were premature to a point. You can have it even when you're full term.
yeah, it's just trying to figure out, and I understand that, like, if you want to sit there and use the, oh well, when does life actually take place, there's no science. I'm showing there's no scientific or medical agreement on when a fetus is viable or not.
Can I quickly go over the history of abortion that I found?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's interesting. First of all, I want to state that the CDC broadly divides abortions into two categories. You have your surgical abortions and your medical abortions. America's first anti abortion movement was fueled by physicians on a mission to regulate medicine rather than moral or religious concerns.
To regulate medicine, how?
So that everybody was doing the same thing, basically.
Oh, okay, so
So
to
instead of
find
like,
a consensus of how things should be done.
yeah,
Correct.
so it's putting in like rules in place of like, oh, well, George down the street's doing this when Henry upstate's doing that.
Right. Prior to 1857, abortion was legal in all U.S. states until quickening, or when fetal motion could be felt by the mother.
So usually, so when baby kicks.
When they can feel the baby moving, that's when they said no,
Hmm.
no more abortions.
But
I can agree with that.
what if you thought it was the baby kicking and you just have a whole bunch of gas?
Don't know.
See
Usually they'll
that's just a
check
little weird.
that. They'll check.
Okay.
So you go, oh, I think I felt this. They'll do an ultrasound. There's ways where, like, if you're doing a kick count with your
But in
baby,
1857, they didn't have that shit.
Yeah, I was gonna say.
they didn't have an
Wait,
ultrasound.
but
In
how did they
1857.
they
Okay.
do abortions in 1857?
A
You
hanger.
know what? I don't want to know.
Flight of stairs, coat hanger,
Yeah.
God.
Did they have coat
They had
mule.
hangers in
they had
1857?
Yeah, how do you
Yeah,
think they
yeah.
hung their dresses up?
Or the rusty
like grab one of them,
Ah!
scalpel.
Oh, you guys are making my skin crawl.
But yeah, so there are ways to find out what actual like if you have legit fetal movement.
So the American Medical Association, which was established in 1847, took aim at unregulated providers in 1857 with a letter writing campaign pushing state lawmakers to ban the practice of abortions, making their case by saying there was a medical consensus that life begins at conception rather than at quickening. Those practitioners, those providers, were most often midwives. So doctors weren't performing abortions, midwives were.
Yeah.
Mm.
Well, because back then it was, a girl's business, a lady's business,
Mm-hmm.
not, you know. Usually doctor was not called in unless it was like life or death.
Right. At least 40 anti abortion laws went on the books between 1860 and 1880.
Tis the beginning of the back alley abortion.
In the 1920s to 30s, many cities had physicians who specialized in abortions, and other doctors would refer patients to them off books as they were illegal in almost all the states and territories. Those are your backdoor
Your back
programs.
alley.
Yeah.
Yep. Well, and even the ones that didn't get referred to professional doctors, there were women performing them literally in alleys or in their houses.
So there's a movie that brings to mind, and it's called Jane.
Mm-hmm.
If you've never seen this movie, I recommend you watch it. In the 1940s and 50s, more doctors were persecuted for performing abortions, which drove the practice underground and into less skilled hands. In the 1950s and 60s, up to 1.2 million abortions were performed every year in the U.S. In 1965, 17% of reported deaths attributed to pregnancy and childbirth were associated with illegal abortions. From 1963 to 1965, more liberal abortion laws were set forth due to an outbreak of rubella. Catching rubella during pregnancy could often cause severe birth defects, so they kind of loosened their grip there. And then, of course, we know about Roe versus Wade in 1973.
Yep.
And then again in 2022 with the overturn of Roe versus Wade. But yeah, I found it interesting that it wasn't a religious thing to start with, and I feel like the religions just kind of sunk their claws into that part of the religion and ran with it, in my opinion.
I kind of feel that too. It's just like once they learned that this was happening, they kind of just sunk their heels in.
Well, like the thing I don't understand is even if you make it illegal, people are it's just like drugs. People are gonna find a way to do it. Why not give them a safe way to do it?
Mm-hmm.
Or why criminalize it to the point where women feel like they have to hide and travel to a state and hope there's an appointment in time to end something that it may not be good for their lives, or and I understand, yes, like in cases of people who use like birth control, maybe they should get hit in the head a couple times to get some common sense and either get on like a Mirena where you don't have to take it out for like 5 years, but it's just the few people who use it as like a form of birth control is what they cling to sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
When
the thing about that is, though, is they're not the minority. Most people getting abortions are people abusing it, not people who are using it for general need. And almost every state, I don't know of a state that doesn't have this, but someone can correct me in the comments, that's fine. Um, but to my knowledge, there is no state that doesn't have justifiable abortion. It's just what is justifiable changes. Like, I've yet to
That
see a state that's like, if you've been raped and you were impregnated by the rapist, they force you to keep it.
there are some states that are working on no exceptions, whether it's
That
rape,
mhm.
that may
incest, or
be,
anything like that.
but currently, to my knowledge, there's none that have laws that.
Currently, to my knowledge as well, but there are states where they are
But
working on
it's the
literally
fact
banning it
that they're
completely.
trying to say
Yeah.
there are no exceptions whatsoever. And let's
Sure.
say it's a 13-year-old girl who got raped, wound up pregnant. That girl is going to have, even if she
Issues.
chose adoption, like let's say it in a state and they sit there and they say that, oh, you have to have this child. You can put it up for adoption, but you have to have this child. That
That
can
child is
be
going to get
more
years of therapy.
mentally damaging for her for the rest of her life, being forced to carry and feel and maybe even loathe the life inside of her, where maybe she always wanted to have a family, but who's to say that's not ruined, and she is going to have to do years and years and years and years and years of therapy where she may never get to have kids because she had such a negative experience.
Well, let's also think about the fact that her body isn't developed enough to actually carry. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah,
yes, she's
it's
13,
just
but she's small. A
I
full
and
grown
I can
baby is a
understand,
C
okay,
section, probably for her.
each state gets their choice, but you're damning a girl who did nothing wrong. Like she
Hmm.
didn't choose for that to happen. Like I get it. If I was 15, I still wouldn't have had an abortion if I ever became pregnant cuz I personally couldn't do it. But I made that choice myself to decide to not be on birth control, not have that boy use a condom. I knew the risks I was putting myself in. In the case of someone being raped, they didn't choose that. They didn't get that choice.
Sure. But, and again, not trying to say what you're saying is incorrect, but you have to look at it again because here's the problem. When you stop arguing law and you start arguing morality, that's a huge swath. It's like, for the same reason, it's not fair to say, a transsexual should not have the same rights as a bisexual, right? Because you believe in love with individuals, you don't believe in body mutilation. And I'm not saying that I think it's body mutilation. I'm just using these hot button topics to emphasize the point. And that is you can't pick and choose and be completely righteous in that choice. And that's the problem people are having because it's a difficult question to answer. Now, you can argue and say it's a clump of cell, it's a whatever, or the trauma of this woman should not be further potential traumatization simply because, of this next course of action. But in that case, let's say I'm a father and you're my daughter and some terrible creep rapes you. Well, if I murder him under that same morality logic, I should not go to jail. I should be allowed to murder anybody who slights my daughter because it's a horrible traumatic event to have to live in a world for her knowing this creep is still alive and out and doing things.
Well, no, then that's where the law comes in
But
and
that's just
he
it.
would
Why
be
does the law come
punished.
in and tell you that you have to have the
Because
baby?
that's not the baby portion of it, but the law comes in regards to you murdering another person because technically you're not supposed to do that. Now, putting that in abortion terms, it's not alive, it's not viable outside the womb.
Well,
Even if it is
that's
though,
but
like
that but that's the
Even if
problem with
it
those
is,
type
it
of
still
terminology.
requires another person to take care of it. It's not viable.
Okay, so if that's the argument you choose to use, So then people who are special needs, who cannot survive without assisted medical nature or assisted living, should I be able to murder them?
So then why is it if I choose to try to commit suicide, the police are allowed to commit me for 72 hours? I'm choosing that myself. Why does the law get to tell me I don't get to kill myself?
Well,
That's my
it's
choice.
right. And that's what the thing I made earlier, right? Was I think if people choose to do that, they should be given the option to have self-autonomy. But the laws, again, this is the problem with making laws that judge morality. There can never be a perfect law system because it's like saying, let's make laws based on emotions and not facts. A lot of people who are pro-choice like to quote statistics and like to say like, well, if science says this or that. The problem is that science is not religion and it's not a person. It's a collection of information and it's flawed, not always right. It's right currently, but like bread, what's right today can be wrong tomorrow. It can go bad. That's what science doesn't claim to be an answer to everything. It simply tries to answer everything.
Part of it. Can't they sit there and you can write into a law that abortion is illegal except for in the case of rape, let's say.
Yeah.
But you have to have evidence. There has to be a police report, blah 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 blah. Why can't you write a law like that then? Why don't they ever write laws? Like if they're saying something is so illegal except for in this instance, why don't they just write laws point blank being like you can't have an abortion unless you were raped?
Well, they do have laws like that. That's the thing. When Roe versus Wade happened, even though a lot of laws suddenly were taking over, it's kind of a poor way to say that, but basically, since all the state laws that were previously written at the time it was overturned, a lot of them didn't encounter every scenario. Laws aren't actually designed to come up with every conceivable thing that could happen. They try to be more broad in scope so they can make less laws. Um, but most, like I said, most states they already have that in law. Like my friend who has a daughter was up in arms. He's like, how dare they tell her what she can do with her body? He's all against it. And I'm like, dude, Missouri has had these laws on the books for decades. She couldn't have gotten an abortion if she wanted to just willy nilly. Roe versus Wade wasn't going to change that. All it did is gave her a legal course to argue in court.
Yeah, but then you're gonna wind up probably having the kid anyways because they're gonna drag it out.
Well, the thing is, you could still get the abortion, and then if you're found guilty after the fact, that would be a totally separate issue. But with Roe versus
Mm.
Wade showing precedence, the likelihood that would happen, and again, also including what I talked about, the states having to actually battle hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people, it's never going to happen because it's just not worth the fight. It's the same reason why you hear about big corporations who pay people off, and then people report it like, and they're like, "Oh my God, did you hear about this? Pepsi paid off all these people. Can you believe it?" Of course they paid them off. Even if Pepsi was right, they pay them off because it's just not worth the bad publicity and dragging it out all day. Celebrities do it all the time. Celebrities will be stalked by people and have their lives, ruined and get PTSD, but they'll end up paying these people money just to shut them up and make them go away because it's just not worth their time to keep appearing in court or paying a lawyer massive amounts of money because these corporate lawyers or private lawyers, they charge like $500 an hour.
If
And that's
not
like
more.
for just a small one. Yeah, if you're a big corporation, they deal in the billions. So like the reality of the situation is the government doesn't want to go bankrupt fighting its own people. So unless they have a clear-cut way to throw your butt in jail or get rid of you, they're not going to deal with it most of the time.
See
Then
the
what's the point of making this an issue anyway?
be
Why not
Well,
just
the
keep
people
the
that are
law
making it an
of Roe
issue,
versus Wade?
well, the biggest people that are making it an issue are the people who are ignorant to the law and the people who don't understand what the government was trying to do, as is in many cases. Laws are made as a whole for everyone, right? But they don't always address individual people with individual problems. My wife and I saw this one girl a couple of years ago. I can't remember her name, but she has like a reverse Benjamin Button's disease where she eternally looks like she's 8 and she has their
Mhm.
growth hormones have stopped her from growing. She's like in her 20s. Like I think she's in her mid 20s now, maybe even her late 20s, but she straight up looks like an 8-year-old. She's not just short, she looks like an underdeveloped child.
So
And
she's
so
like,
every time she goes anywhere, she gets carded like 15 times. People think that, and just having a normal relationship is difficult because she has the mind and development of an adult, but her body is that of a child. So how do you date? How do you have children? How do you have relations with somebody? All of that is a nightmare for her, right?
mhm.
But the laws aren't designed around someone because she's an oddity. She's an anomaly in what a normal person should develop like. Therefore, carding laws and all that, she's going to run into problems. People will think she's making up stuff, or it's a scam, or it's a trap, or whatever. And that happens, right? Like even to make it a simpler argument, right? My wife, Lorelai, is short. The world was not designed for short people.
No, it was not.
So when and some people just design poorly anyway.
Well, it's
You know,
just like my son with his diagnosis. He's going in middle school and he looks like a second grader. The world's not built for him. So like we have stools around the house now because he wants to be more independent.
I'm telling
But
you, you need to get the Riti toll.
yeah, I'm thinking about that. But uh,
red claw.
like I told you guys last time we were recording and we were done, he's not gonna get over like 4 foot something.
Hmm.
So for him, for the rest of his life, he could be 30 some years old wanting to go to a bar, and let's say he forgets his ID, but because he's so short and probably looks so young, who's to say they're gonna just tell him no? And then it's like, crap, my ID now. I gotta drive. Let's say he drives 45 minutes. It's not built like that for them. But I believe there are certain things like an incident like this where no matter what, it's easy to write into a law. If you were raped and you become pregnant, you can have an abortion, no questions asked. No, you're not going to be charged or anything like that because of the fact that it was something you didn't want. It was not your choice. So to me, there is no moral, religious, scientific standings to make it inaccessible for a person. Someone
Right.
just needs to learn how to write it to the point where it is protecting, because you're never going to make everybody happy. The majority of the United States as a whole, not separate in states, agree abortion should be legal in some way, shape, or form.
Okay, what if I'm a man and I'm with a woman and we have sex and she finds out she's pregnant, but we've already broken up? And she then says that I raped her in order to get an abortion, but I want to keep that kid. What happens then?
There was a case where this was not a rape case. There was a case where a man and a woman had sex. She got pregnant. She didn't want the baby. He did. He convinced her to keep the baby. But in order for her to actually go through the pregnancy and give birth and everything, she signed away all of her parental rights. As soon as she gave birth to the baby, she wanted nothing to do with it. They gave baby to dad. She pays more than what she should in child support, and he still took her to court. I believe she won the case because he was literally trying to baby trap her.
Okay, but
Well, not even,
that
but
has nothing to do with the situation of now I am a
so
guy
But you're
whose
sitting there as the man.
ex-girlfriend
Your
is
your
accusing
statement
me of
that
rape so
case
that
comes
she
well,
can
no,
in.
no,
get
no,
rid of
no.
my child.
So in the case of like the laws, you would have had to file a police report. If there's no police report filed, no. If you're just screaming rape
There's nothing
because
they
you
can
don't
do.
want to have a child, no, they're legally, no, nothing should happen.
So
You chose because you two broke up and now you want to scream that? No, because that makes it harder for women who are actually raped to sit there. And I'm sorry, I'm getting a little upset with this because of the fact that this is the reason why sometimes women don't report it, is because people who scream rape and it doesn't actually happen makes
Mhm.
people not believe them anyways.
Right, and
well
there's another
that's
You
the other
chose,
TV
you
show that I
chose to
could
sit
direct you
there,
to for this one too. By
you
the way,
chose to be in a relationship with someone, and because it didn't work out, all of a sudden you find out you're pregnant. Either you two come to a consensus of, you know what, I don't want this kid, you take him, by all means. But then you come up with the consensus of, You want this child, I don't want to pay child support. I want nothing to do with this child. Blah 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 blah. You have to come up with a consensus. Don't scream rape because you make it harder for people who actually have it happen be believed.
Or, if you come
Sorry.
up with the agreement of you're going to have the baby and I'll take care of it, you sign away your rights, don't come after the other person just
So,
because you think that they should be in the child's life.
right, and those are excellent points, but you know, uh, playing devil's advocate, right? So here's the thing. The problem is it's the scenario of you can't have your cake and eat it too. And what I mean by that is this. So there's no perfect law because there's too many scenarios. So let's say I'm a young woman. I'm naive. I fall in love with somebody. I think this person and I are going to be together forever. We have sex. I get pregnant, right? Now, if I do something like the scenario you propose and I suddenly claim rape, right? It's disingenuous. It's horrible. Okay. But you're like, well, if we had a law that showed you had to provide proof and all this stuff in a police report first, then, otherwise you're going to have to deal with the ramifications. Okay, that works against that very specific scenario. But let's change that scenario slightly. I'm still the same naive girl. I meet the same boy. I think he's going to be great. But I'm afraid of him. I try to leave him. He forces himself on me and threatens my life or my family. So I say nothing. I'm raped, but I'm so fearful, and this scenario is very common, that I don't
Yeah.
tell anyone. Now, later, I get away from him. I manage to escape. Somebody helps me in a group, and I say, okay, I wanted to now claim rape. Under your law, I couldn't do that because I didn't have the initial police report.
Okay. I see my fault.
And no, I'm not saying you're
No, no,
wrong
no, no.
in your
I didn't.
methodology.
It didn't click in my brain that that's a scenario that could happen, even though it's very common.
Right, and
So
that's
that woman isn't
exactly.
protected then.
And that's the problem. No law is perfect because there's always an in and out. That's why our law system, although one of the better law systems in the world, it's not flawless. Innocent people get hurt and taken advantage of because they find loopholes. They find ways to wiggle around stuff. They find plea deals and that kind of thing. So I'm not arguing that there should be no laws or that there should be oppressive laws. I think laws do serve a purpose. I think leadership has a purpose. And I think the fact that we can have discussions like this, that we can oppose things we don't like, that we can go to our government and say, this is bullshit, this needs to be changed, and not just get thrown in jail or murdered because our leadership decides we're a problem. I think that's a great place to be. I think the discussion is great. The problem is people get hyperbolic about things. They get tunnel vision and they only look at what they believe to be correct. And they're like, I don't care what anyone says, this is wrong. And I go, but it's only wrong because you're in this one frame of view.
Mhm.
In recent times, even getting away from the fact of whether or not an abortion itself should be done, right? If we get away from the morality argument, what about it takes two to tango? So I may want a child, and let's say you and I are together, right, Jesse? And
Mm-hmm.
so we decide to have a child. There's no rape involved. But then you decide, well, I no longer want this child because you're a douchebag and I fell in love with some other person. And I go, right, but that's still my baby. And you go, my body, my choice. You now have stolen my child and murdered my child because that child to me was going to happen. It was a thing. And you just simply called an audible. Now, how is that fair? How is it okay for you to renege on that deal that we set down?
There's many factors in it. Was it a mutual breakup or did I leave? Did you
Shouldn't
leave?
matter.
Well, to a
Why
point,
doesn't
yes,
he
it
get a
does,
right?
because he
Right.
does get a right to a point, but
To
yet
a point.
But that's just it. Men don't have rights in this argument. It's my body, my choice, and because I'm not part of your body, I have no choice.
But at the same
are you going to pay
time,
child support through the whole pregnancy then?
yeah,
Are
we're the
you
ones that
are
are
you the
carrying this thing for
one
9 months and dealing with everything else.
It's not
I
even
didn't get paid
that.
child support for pregnancy.
Well, here's the
Well,
thing.
That's
people
not
were
tax.
talking
Listen,
about that
no,
happening.
no, because you can't prove DNA technically. Most, I don't know if there's a way, because I know you can do like your
You
what
can do
is it called?
genetic testing. It's a
You can do
giant
genetic
needle.
testing. I don't know if you can technically do DNA off of that, but let's say you can, and it is 100% Jericho's kid. Do I have the right then being like, well, you know what? I have a high risk pregnancy. I can't work now. So you have to pay me child support because I need to support me and this child.
Well,
Should that be a thing then?
well, that's something men have been arguing for in recent time is that um, if women have my body, my choice, right? If we're forced into that argument,
Mm-hmm.
then men should have my money, my choice.
But then technically,
But technically,
women should also have that as well because we make money as well.
Well, no,
it's not
it's not,
even that.
but it's your choice. Like, so flip the scenario. So instead of Jesse not wanting the child, let's say I committed to Jesse. We were in a relationship. We planned to have children together. She gets pregnant. Then I'd say, you know what? I don't really want to be a dad anymore. I'm gonna dip.
That's what most
Have the
men
And
do.
children been born or not yet?
so they haven't been born yet,
Okay.
right? So I say, well, and you come, well, I'm gonna get. I want to keep the baby. So you say now you have to pay me child support. I go, nah. You chose to have the kid. Your body, your choice. I chose not to pay because I don't want anything to do with the kid.
Is
But men
abortion
can't.
legal or illegal in my state?
Well, that's
But
just
you
it.
also have
Right
to
now, men
realize
don't
that you
have a
need to
choice.
sign away your parental
I mean,
rights to
Even
the
if you
kid.
no, even if you sign away your parental rights, you are still financially responsible for that child. That's why that woman
Exactly.
had to pay child support. So
And in
I'm
recent
gonna
news, there'd been a
I'm
man who was a sperm donor. He wasn't even in a relationship. A woman got his sperm, found out who he was, and sued him for child support
are you
and won.
freaking
Now, I'm
serious?
sorry. According to HIPAA laws, she should never have found out who he
She
was.
should
Well,
have never found
the
out.
child is allowed to
She
go to
shouldn't,
court.
but
No,
she did.
legally. My father who raised me was not my biological father. I know nothing of my biological father's medical history. Legally, I can go to a judge and say I need to subpoena my father's medical history because I need to know what I'm predisposed to. My mother could not do it though because she had no legal right to. So the child should be able to request at least medical history. You wanted a child so bad that you chose a sperm donor.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Why?
He
Why?
he decided to donate knowing his or thinking his privacy was going to be protected. Now that's BS. No, you chose to have a child outside of a relationship, or if you have a relationship with someone and like you guys just, let's say the man's infertile and he's okay with sperm donor, let's say. Why
Well,
should that
because
man
usually,
who donated be responsible when you're in a relationship with someone else?
yeah, so usually couples will decide on a donor, or like if you want to do it yourself, you do it yourself. But exactly, that donor should not be responsible for anything he donated.
So
He should have
this
privacy.
so this goes back to the crux of the argument, which I started with at the beginning of our conversation, is that the argument of pro-choice versus pro-life is not simply one of religion or simply one of bodily autonomy. It's a very nuanced subject because there's many reasons people could want to or not abort. Like you may say, I think abortion should be allowed by everyone so long as there's a justifiable reason, rape or like if it would kill the mother and there's a very low percentage of the child survival, whatever you want to paint the tapestry of what you believe is justified.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is the moment you say we should do that, every other person, these people generally being women, but men have their views on it too, who chime in and say, well, I think that's stupid. I should be able to abort whenever I feel like. Why is your opinion more or less valid? What makes it more or less legal? And that's the problem. There's no cut and dry scenario where it fits everyone, right? My wife hates cilantro.
What?
should she be allowed to outlaw cilantro in Mexican food simply because she doesn't like the taste where I do?
You don't like cilantro,
You
Laura?
don't like
Tastes like
cilantro?
soap.
What?
Yeah,
Why is
I
it
it's
so
it's
mean,
actually a common
delicious?
alcohol tastes
genetic
like cough
mutation where
syrup to
some people
me,
make it taste
so
like soap.
Oh, okay.
But
But
my point is that it sounds like a ridiculous argument. Like, well, who cares? You're talking about abortion, or you're talking about cilantro. But when you're making any argument take it from someone who's been in debate, that likes to debate, that makes legal, non-legal arguments with people, the thing about that is the only true way to argue a point is factual. Anything else that you throw in muddies the water, and it basically makes your argument invalid. Because if you argue on the basis of morality, two people's moralities can vary, right? Do we kill rapists? Do we imprison rapists? Do we try to reform rapists? Well, if you talk to
oh,
some religious
murder all the
people, they'll tell
way.
you that it's not our place to end someone's life over that. But they will happily imprison someone for all of life, which is essentially ending their life. Although they are still alive, they are living like an animal. They are not living as a free individual or someone
where
whose own rights
someone
and freedoms are still intact, right?
like me may say, oh, well, life in prison for someone who may be able to be rehabilitated is wrong.
Yeah, but we give life in prison to murderers, so I
No,
mean,
not just murder. There
well,
are people who literally in certain states they have 3-strike rules where let's say I get caught 2 times with so much marijuana
Marijuana.
on me,
Mm-hmm.
and
mm-hmm.
then I get caught a 3rd time, I'm in jail for life
Yep.
for a non-violent crime because it was my 3rd offense.
I was putting the more violent one as to say because we put people away for lesser things, and they're in there for life.
But
Because Jericho also
there
brought up
have
the whole death penalty thing.
but there are cases in other countries where murderers have been in, let's say, for 25 years and released and are very productive members of society. It does happen. But we're going on to a totally different debate, but it's to
But I think
me,
the core is the same, right? And that
yeah, so the
is,
core is Jericho may believe that if it's there's a rapist or a murderer, they should be in prison for life, and I say no, they should be evaluated to see if they can be reformed. And let's say Laura says no, we should kill all murderers. That's 3 different moralities, and the law can't appease all of us.
Okay, we need to start wrapping things up. I do have a quote here I want to read. Um, it was when the road decision was handed down. This quote was made, praising the ruling. It says, I've always felt that it was only after a child was born and had a life separate from its mother that it became an individual person. And it has always, therefore, seemed to me that what is best for the mother and for the future should be allowed. Anyone want to guess who made that quote?
Jane Fonda? I don't know.
Is better than mine. I was gonna say Lincoln, and he's dead.
Lincoln was dead well before that, darling.
I
did you
know, but I'm
say
like, that's such
Lincoln?
a yeah. Well, I was
Oh,
gonna say it as a joke, honestly.
she's trying to cover now.
No, I'm serious. That's why I stated I was gonna say Lincoln, but he's dead. So
It was stated by W.A. Criswell, who was the pastor of the First Baptist Church in Dallas, Texas.
Actually, that's quite interesting.
Uh-huh. I thought you'd find that interesting.
Bye.
Goodbye.
Like, follow, subscribe, comment, share.